What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Concept of the Week. Today we are talking about how to be a loose, aggressive player. First question we have to ask ourselves when it comes to being a loose aggressive player is, what is a loose aggressive player? What is a lag? When you start to play poker, you will see a lot of people that are super aggressive. They just start betting all the time, and you see them show down with hands like queen deuce suited, and you're like, that's not good. That can't possibly be a strong enough hand to play. When I first started playing poker, I had a very hard time playing against this player type. This was honestly the most difficult player to play against because they could show up with any two cards. It was very frustrating. I probably lost a ton of money to loose aggressive players just from bluffing me because I didn't fully understand how they were playing. I just knew they were playing very loosely. So what I did is I decided to take it upon myself on exactly how to be a loose aggressive player. I lost a lot of money when I first started. There's a lot of learning that goes into playing this strategy, but once you figure it out, which I have, you get a lot of benefits from it. So first thing I want to show you is a little clip from Rounders. It's one of my favorite movies. If you haven't seen Rounders, I highly recommend it, especially as a poker player. I'll also list another movie below that I recommend watching that is just good for getting into the game. So this is a clip from Rounders. Matt Damon is trying to become a lawyer and is talking to his closest judge friend, and he stopped by one of his poker games and watched them play. The judge had a question for him. He asked Matt Damon this.
Well, if it wasn't magic, how did you know what everyone held?
That's a combination of things. I was watching when the cards came out. That's just an old habit with me, like breathing.
You watched the cards?
I watched the cards also, but I watched the players reacting to the cards. That's how I knew the DA made his two pair and Judge Kaplan missed the flush. Yeah. I was watching their eyes when they checked their river cards. Their faces tell you everything.
You watched the man. I never knew you had to calculate so much at cards.
All right, here's the thing. You want to play premium hands. You only start with jacks or better split, nines or better wired, three high cards to a flush. If it's good enough to call, you got to be in there raising, all right? I mean tight, but aggressive. And I do mean aggressive. That's your style, Professor. I mean, you gotta think of it as a war.
You were officially never invited to our game again.
So here they talk about being a tight aggressive opponent. This is exactly opposite of what a loose aggressive opponent, but the qualities are still important to know. Aggression. Poker. You need to be aggressive in poker.
Be aggressive. Be aggressive.
So let's talk about it. Why do we want to be a lag? I kind of just touched on it. It's important to be betting and being the one that has the aggression or is the aggressor because you want to make other people full. The best way to make money in poker is to make people full. Make sure they have no equity. But that's neither here nor there. That's a talk for another time. Why do we want to be a lag? Well, the first reason is people really do like to fold. People don't want to be putting their money in with a hand that's going to lose them money. They only want to be sticking it in when they're fairly confident they're going to win. That being said, people don't really understand the relative strength of their hands. And so this is the benefit of being a loose aggressive opponent. We have a wider range. We can bet with more hands and they're gonna have a harder time calling. The one caveat is against a good tight aggressive opponent who knows you're loose, you're going to need to change gears very often as a loose aggressive. Once people start to catch on to your aggression, they might change their play style. Against a really strong tight aggressive opponent or a tight player, it's good to be loose against them, but once they start calling you down, you might have to reconsider betting so much. And this is the other thing I want to talk about. The second reason why we want to be lag is because people are playing way too tight in a live setting. People, again, really only want to show down with hands that they're fairly certain are going to win. That being said, when they just call, they probably have a hand like king queen suited, king jack suited, hands that are very strong and very easy to play. As a loose player, we can push them off of these hands because people are going to miss the flop 2/3 of the time. Because they miss so often, we can take advantage of them with our aggression and make them fold. The third reason, and the best reason, you want to be a loose aggressive opponent is because it is a fantastic image to have. Being a loose aggressive opponent allows you to get paid in so many more spots. Reason being is because you're so loose, they have to call down more frequently. It's also really awesome because now that you've developed a wider range, you can incorporate this into your game and start to smooth things out so you have a better overall strategy. Being a tight aggressive opponent is really good for poker because it's very simple, it's very straightforward, and it will make you money. It's hard to lose when you're playing a very tight strategy. The best thing though is to play both a tight and loose strategy. Someone who's a poker player understands all the aspects of poker and can play literally any two cards because they know the relative strength and the relative value of every single hand that they play. Now the way to do this is to widen your range. Now what do I mean by widening your range? What you really have to do is take a look at the value of hands. Everyone knows how to play pocket aces, everyone knows how to play pocket kings and strong hands like that. The question I have for you is, do you know how to play your suited connectors? When you start to become a loose aggressive opponent, understanding how to play suited connectors very well is the step or the gateway into becoming a very successful loose aggressive opponent. Once you understand suited connectors, you can start widening your range to hands like King 10 offsuit, King Jack offsuit, because now you're starting to understand hand strength. And I'm going to show you a little bit on hand strength right now. If you take a look at the equities, they are fairly close, 37% to 62%. That's not too bad. It's about 13% off from 50-50, meaning 8-7 suited has pretty good equity. This is where you start to look at other hand strengths and see how they compare. 7-8 suited is a very strong hand because of its suitedness and its connectivity. It is very solid, something like that we like to call playability. Now I'm going to show you a hand that's a little harder to play, but a hand that does also have decent equity, and this is Jack 7 suited. Taking a look at Jack 7 suited, we've only lost 3% equity when comparing it to a hand like King Queen suited. Jack 7 suited does not have the same attributes as 8-7 suited with its connectivity, but it still has a very strong value behind its flush draw. Also, it's live cards compared to King Queen. Now, obviously, we're just comparing this to one hand, so this is known as exact hand equity analysis. What we can also do is put in ranges and compare a hand like King Queen and King Jack and Ace King in a range and compare it to Jack 7 suited, 8-7 suited, and a hand like 6 Deuce suited. And so I just went ahead and did that. We will take a look and see that player 1 has very strong hands, Ace King suited, Queen King suited, and player 2 does not. He has a hand 6-3 suited and Jack 7 suited. If we take a look at the equities though, they're still about the same, 36 to 63%. That is a really important thing to note because when you take a look at the game of poker, it comes down to equity. This is why math is so important. If you understand how hand strength is important and how relative it is, you can start to open up your range and play more hands. The benefit to playing more hands? Well, one, you get to play more hands. No one likes to come to a poker game and fold. The second benefit is it allows you to play more hands. It sounds redundant, but it's a little different. You are literally able to play hands that other people are not. This topic is really for another video, which I will discuss very shortly. It's called board coverage. And this is something that really allows you to put pressure on your opponent. They're gonna have a very hard time calling you because you have so many more hands in your range. You just have to understand a little bit more about board texture. So when an ace comes on the board, if you're playing against a tight player, this is when your aggression can kind of hinder you or be a problem to you if you don't know how to control it. Some boards are just not your board. As a loose player, you really want to be attacking those weak lower boards because you are the one that can have those hands more frequently. The second step is to really understand how position is super important. We all know that the button is a big deal, but really how big of a deal is it? The button is extremely important. If I told you that every hand that you played in position would add 15% equity to your hand, you would play more hands, right? Well, that's exactly what the button does. It gives you 15% more equity. Why is this? Well, when you're in position, you have the last say in the flow of the game. And the reason why this is important and why it adds equity to your hand is because when you're in position, you can take the free card or you can choose to bet people off their hand. No one else has this option. They can check and hope you don't bet, but they can't check and determine that they're going to get that free card. By seeing more cards, like the turn of the river, you add equity to your hand because you are able to realize the equity of your hand. By checking the turn in the river and taking that free card, you give yourself more equity because you're allowing your hand to realize more of its equity. The problem a lot of loose players have is they bet too much and don't realize the equity of their hand. By playing your hand correctly and realizing its equity is when you can really put the pressure on players. How tough is it to play against someone who is going to check a lot of their flops and bet a lot of their turns when they're playing more hands than you? Pretty difficult. You have to start incorporating some more check raises, maybe some donk betting, different strategies that people aren't very comfortable with. So with the loose strategy, the main point is to realize more of your equity. Take some free cards sometimes. Obviously don't become exploitable and just check every flop and every turn, but just recognize that when you have a hand that is a little harder to play, taking free cards is always an option. The third step, and this is quintessential to wrapping up being a loose aggressive player, is to know your opponents. If you don't know your opponents, you're gonna have a very hard time playing lag. Sometimes playing a lag strategy is just not the best idea. When you know your player type, it's easier to play a lag strategy. If you know you're going up against a tight player, they're gonna be folding too much and it's gonna be very easy to bet and play your hand. However, if you're playing against another lag opponent, now you have to take into a couple factors in order to determine if playing a lag strategy is going to be profitable for you. The first factor is, are they good? If they're a good lag player and know how to check raise you in spots or donk bet, this is someone you probably don't want to be playing too loose against. However, on the other hand, it could also be a loose aggressive player that you're playing against, but he's bad and just calling too much. This is someone we like to call a fish or a very weak player.
These are some of the worst players in the entire world over here. How do these players, how are they even still in this tournament?
They just call too many hands, they have a wide range, they're very, very loose, but they're not aggressive, they're too passive. They're just calling and allowing you to bet them off their hands. This is a loose type of player that you can play against because loose aggressive strategy does combat some looseness very well. It's just when they're also aggressive is when you're gonna have a hard time. So that was my video on being a loose aggressive opponent. If you really enjoyed this video, please like and comment below. If you have any questions or would like me to discuss any other topics on poker, let me know as well in the comments below. Also, if you haven't subscribed, please do that as well. I'm gonna be coming out with a lot more videos. Every Monday, I'm going to have a concept of the week video just like this, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Once again, thank you for checking out the video. This has been Alex with GrossPoker. Keep grossing all the money you can in poker, and I'll see you next time.